I'm broadcasting.
Hi, everyone. Mike Beckel here, coming to you from my home office in Kentucky.
Hey, folks.
We at Cadwell. Hey, John. We at Cadwell hope everyone is safe and healthy as we all work together to minimize the effects of this COVID-19 pandemic. As many of you know, I'm the Midwest I&M Regional Sales Manager for Cadwell Industries, and I'd like to welcome you to Session 2 of our Education in Isolation series. Everything you need to know about Cascade Surgical Studio. Today's session is titled Under the Hood of Surgical Studio. Like last week's session, working with me today from the great city of Nashville is my friend, Field Installation and Application Support Specialist, Jonathan Green. Hey, John.
Hey, Mike. Thanks, man. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody.
Yeah, welcome. How are things in Nashville today?
Oh, it's beautiful in Nashville today. Nice sunshiny day outside. Excellent. And keeping my social distance.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I hope the same for everybody who's joining us today. I know there's some storms moving through the country, and hopefully everybody's safe and well as your families. So with that, we got an hour to do Education in Isolation, Cascade Surgical Studio Under the Hood. So let's get started. I'm going to remove myself from the view here. And just a little bit of housekeeping so everybody's aware of what we're working with today. And move on to the next slide. We are using the GoToWebinar tool today. So those of you who joined us last week will recognize this. But for anybody new, I want to point out what's available to you. You should be seeing this tool. On the left-hand side is an orange arrow, which allows you to minimize and bring out the tool. Below that is your connection tool. Below that is the maximize view or screen. And below that is the hand raise. We'll be using that a little bit later. I would like to point out the handouts I've provided today. 2 handouts, Education in Isolation, everything you need to know about Cascade Surgical Studio. This is an outline of the entire series from session 1, 2, and 3. So you can look at that at your leisure. And then Education in Isolation, session 2. This is a more detailed outline of what we'll be discussing today. Below that is the question area. So as we proceed through today's webinar, you are able to ask questions. Just enter them in the Enter a Question for Staff section. And Jonathan will be taking those questions, and if there's something that needs clarification, him and I will work together to do that, or he may answer you individually if it's something that he can handle there. We will use the hand raise function at the end of the webinar for a few verbal questions. You raise your hand, Jonathan can unmute you. You will also need to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a verbal question. We will do our best to answer it for you. Next, the overall outline. Many of you did join us on session 1, transitioning to Surgical Studio from Cascade Classic. It was recorded, so if you did not have the opportunity to join us, you can go back and look at that. And those are the headings there. Today we're doing 2 Under the Hood, and next week, in 1 week's time, Wednesday, April 29th, we'll be doing the Surgical Studio Masterclass, which will build upon the skills we learned today. Here's today's outline. We're going to cover creating procedure setups. We're going to discuss working with modes. we're going to discuss editing procedure setups, exporting from Classic and importing into Cascade Surgical Studio. We'll cover that and get to a little bit on how we create and edit report templates. So the first thing on today's outline is under creating procedure setups is a brief description of the CADLink data management. So CADLink is a patient data and user settings management system. CADLink software comes standard with Cascade Surgical Studio and provides secure encrypted storage of patient data on the system on which it is installed. In other words, your system, once CADLink will be installed and it will exist locally on your IOM system. Optionally, CADLink server is available to centralize patient data and keep user settings synchronized across all Cadwell systems. So in some scenarios, server can host the CADLink application. Everybody connects to that and patient data and user settings synchronized for everyone. Primary thing I want you to know today, though, is that CADLink exists on your system and exists as a database, and you will be able to save these procedures and patients. This is where all that information is stored. So we'll jump right into it here. Okay, I've already launched Cascade Surgical Studio. Last week's session should have taught you how to do that. And we're going to switch over here to the basic simulator for Cascade 16 Elite or Pro. And the very first thing on our list after CADLink, which we've already discussed, is adding sites. So over here on the left, last week we used the new and append and review. Today we're going to work with templates under procedure setup. We're going to go down here to the right and we're going to set up a new one. So when I choose new, I get to give this a name. So I'm going to today create a cervical spine template, procedure setup template. And in this, I'm going to have SSEPs, I'm going to have EMG, MEPs, and a train of 4. And then the hardware type I'm going to use is Cascade 16 Pro or Elite. Now I've created a user for myself. Most of you from last week will be logging in as admin, which is fine, but I'm going to use this as my own user today. So click OK. Over on the left, we'll see channel setup. This is where all our menus start: modes, mode groups, tests, views, video, and other. So it's going to take us right to channel setup. Again, very similar for people who are used to using Classic. This should feel very similar to you. So we're on the inputs tab. We've got AMP1 and AMP1 pod A, AMP1 pod B, AMP2 pod A, AMP2 pod B. And we're going to be using this as a Cascade Pro 32 setup. Now, to get inputs in here, there's a drop down I could use, and we will use this. These are now called sites within Surgical Studio. And all I need to do is start typing, and this will search for these. So if I want FPZ as my first one, it brings it up as a site. I click on it, go to the next site. CPZ and CP3. So I'm just hitting the enter key. I'm going to pick this CP3. There's multiples in this case. CP4. And we'll put in a cervical up that one. Let's try C5. And there's a cervical for C5 right there. So those will be my head leads. Of course, I could add herbs point or anything else I wanted up there, EEG leads, whatever I needed to do. I'm going to come down here to pod, AMP2 pod A, and I'm going to make this my left side of my body pod. So I'm going to start just by typing deltoid. And one of the really neat things about Surgical Studio is it brings up all the deltoids. And I'm going to use this very first one, left deltoid. Well, the machine's smart enough to know that that's paired with another deltoid, a positive and a negative, so it automatically populates that for me. And then I'm going to do biceps, and I just need to start typing it, biceps. There's a left biceps, put it in spot number 5, and I'm going to start typing triceps. There's a left triceps. And I'm going to put a hand in here, so we'll do a left hand. And then we'll do a, how about some in the leg? We'll do a tib anterior. There's a left tibialis anterior. And we'll do a foot. And you got to spell it right before you find it. Left foot. And now I'll do a similar thing on the right. We'll just start typing deltoid, and this time I'm going to pick the right. Biceps on the right. Triceps. Hand. Tibialis. Foot. So I've created all the inputs I need. Now I'm going to create channels, and you can use this little slider here to move things over. And now, very much like in Classic, I can create channels here. So here's AMP1 channels, AMP2 channels. We're going to start here with the active electrode. Now, if I select here, there is a drop down, and I could go through and put CPZ to FPZ, which is my first channel, which I'll use as a cortical recording channel for my lower. But I can also come over here, and once that's white, I can just hit the numbers next to these recording site inputs. So I'm going to go CP3 to FPZ, CP4 to FPZ, CP3 to CP4, and cervical to FPZ. And I'll come down here to the AMP2 channels, and I'll do left delt positive to negative, left biceps positive to negative, biceps positive to negative, hand, tibialis, foot, and the same for the right. So again, this should very much feel like what we have done in Classic for all these years. And just so I can see this a little better, I'll slide this over. And just like in Classic, you can see you've got your gains, your high and low cuts at the top. They can be individual or all channel. And for all these muscles, I'm going to change them to 200 and change the high cut to, oh, let's go to 2,500, maybe low cut of 30. Whatever you're used to using, you can use here as well. All right, I've created my channels. Now I'm going to hit save as I move along, lower right-hand corner, so all this data is not lost. I'm going to come over here to modes next. And what you'll see is just your channel names over here on the left. What I've noticed is because we use these site names, left deltoid, left biceps, triceps, the names are pretty long, and that's going to show up in my modes. I'm going to go back to channels here, and here's where you can rename these. So I'm going to just call this one LT delt, and I'm using my down arrow to go to my next location. Down arrow. Still with me, Jonathan?
Oh yeah, buddy, I'm here. Just fielding a few
Okay,
questions.
good. Need the backup, so. Plus, it's boring watching people edit names like this, but it's important to know where to do it, so. And right, try. Okay, got all my names there. So now I'll go back to modes, and now that looks a lot better for naming. Okay, we're gonna add our first mode. Now, over here on the left side are the standard mode types that come with Surgical Studio. So we are going to do an upper SSEP, so we'll choose that. We'll click OK. And it loads the screen we need to do an upper SSEP. Now, tab at the top, here's your name. So you're going to want to change this to left or right, or whatever you want to name it. It's totally up to you. But upper SSEP is a generic name, so we need to specify that we want it on a side. Now, we're going to work our way through all of these boxes here. And one of the very nice things about Surgical Studio, virtually every mode type now looks the same, and every area is the same. So we've got our channels, cursors, general settings, and stimulus in the lower right-hand corner. So whether it's an SSEP, an MEP, an EMG, an EEG, if those things are necessary for that mode, they will be in the same location on all of those mode types. Okay, so we're going to work from top to bottom, left to right. Left upper channels, we're going to choose here. Now, once again, I could use the drop down, but I much prefer the buttons over here. So for our left upper, I want to record from CP4 to FPZ, CP3 to CP4, I want double corticals and then a cervical. And of course, if I had Herb's Point, I could put that in there too. And while I'm working here, I can work my way across here. I want to invert this, and you will see it automatically inverts that. So now we're working CP4 to CP3 is our channel. Now I'm going to come down here and set up my cursors. So first one I want is N20. And as I work my way across, I got a peak. The midpoint of where I want it to search for this N20 is at about 20 milliseconds. And the range is how far before and after the 20 do I want it to search? Well, for an N20, I think I want it to do a range of 8. So it's going to search between 16 and 24, and then mark the highest peak between those milliseconds. Alert. So this cursor will turn red if it reaches whatever my alert criteria is compared to baseline. So I want it to alert me if this N20 drifts out more than 10% from the baseline. And then what channel do I want it on? Well, CP4 to FPZ is perfect. So I hit my tab and it'll take me to the next one, or I could hit the plus if I wanted. P23. This is a trough. This is going to be around 23 milliseconds. I'm going to broaden it a little bit. We're going to go 5 before and 5 after. Now, do I want it to alert me if this changes from baseline? I do not. I generally don't care what the P23 latency is, so I don't need an alert there. The P23 will be used in the next step when we mark amplitudes. Now I've got 2 corticals, so I'm going to put another N20 in, and I just like to put a little, like an apostrophe or some kind of symbol to indicate it's different than the other N20. And this is also going to be at 20 milliseconds, a range of 8. And I do want it to alert me at 10%, but this is going to be on the next channel. P23 is going to be a trough around 23, searching over 10, and CP3 to CP4 to CP3 the channel. And then I want an N13, which is a peak around 13 milliseconds. Now, as I get shorter, I generally narrow my range because it doesn't need to be as broad. So it's going to go from 10 to 16 and mark the highest peak. I do want an alert, and I want it on that channel. And finally, I want a P15. That's a trough around 15 milliseconds, and we'll broaden that just a little bit. Don't need an alert. Okay, I've got all my latencies here. The other values that I might want to track are under the advanced cursor settings. So you will see here, I still could work with latencies up here, but at the bottom we have inner latencies, amplitudes, interamplitudes, and area under the curve. The only thing I want for these upper SSEPs are amplitudes. So if I select this, you can see here's where the apostrophes come in helpful. I want the N20, the P23, and I want this to alert me if the amplitude drops by 50% from baseline. And then I want my other cortical cursors, and I also want an alert at 50%, and then N13 to P15 and alert at 50%. And I click OK. Optionally, remember, CAD-Link is existing on my machine. So if I want to save this, I actually choose Export to CAD-Link. And I can give this value a name. Upper SSEP cursors. So something that I know what it belongs to. And then I could come back, and if this were to get messed up, I can quickly import them, and I will get a list of my cursors. And over on the right, you will see all the different tables that belong to that. Now, forward general settings, 5 milliseconds per division is great. For an upper, I don't want any delays. I want an average count of 200. I want it to run in automatic or manual mode. Hopefully you're all familiar with that from Classic. Any of these selections, please just hover on them. They will describe what they do. Amp reject and mute, electrosurgical unit reject and mute, link stimulus parameters. Those things will all be described. Those are features. Some of those are new features just with Surgical Studio. But primarily I want to get through this so you can see the major things to do. I do want it to store when it completes its average, and then rejection settings down here and digital filter at the bottom. Left upper SSEP stimulus settings. So we have a graphic here that sort of shows what our stimulus pulse looks like. We have a rep rate at the top, which you can change, of course, to any. You can type in anything you want. There's also a number of pre-selections there. Where the stimulus is coming from, we just have the stimulus selection of ES9 in this case. So we're going to be using the ES9 stimulator. It's going to be constant current out of high output number 1. Polarity is going to be normal of the stimulus pulse. A new feature of Surgical Studio is stim intensity. So when we launch this, here's where you can put in the intensity you'd like it to start. Not available in Classic. Max intensity, of course, you can type in anything you want or pick a number, and then pulse count and pulse width. Okay, we have now completed mode number 1 for the left upper extremity. I've worked my way through all of these. Now, to do the right upper, I could do a couple things. Well, first off, I could now export this entire mode into CAD-Link. Again, existing on this application as my database. I'm not going to, I've already done that, so I'm just going to cancel that. If I want to duplicate this, one more thing, I'm going to hit save just so I don't lose anything. I could choose clone, and then I could do the right upper extremity. So I'm going to rename this right upper. And just change the couple things I need to change. So first off, I'm going to bring over, now I can't insert it here, but what I can do is bring over CP3 to FPZ. Then I can select it and use these tools to move it to the top so it will appear as the top channel. I could move this one to the bottom. And now I want to uninvert this, so we're using CP3 to CP4. Now, just as a little trick that I've learned from making this mistake, before I actually delete this channel, I want to go down here and move this cursor to CP3 to FPZ. Otherwise, it will remove that. But if it did that, let's just as a real quick training here. If I did happen to delete this, you'll see that that first channel will be gone. So let me delete that channel. So now I no longer have all of the cursors here. I'd have to re-add it, or I can now import it from my cursor tables here. So I'm going to choose this top one. Click OK. This is just a warning that it will overwrite the ones I have in here, and I'll click yes. Now I do have to reassign, but that just takes a second, so no problem there. Okay, so we've done our right. I now would have the option of exporting this to CADLink. So now, as I work my way through this, we've done, I'm looking at my outline here. We've added sites, we've added amp channels, we've added some modes. I'm going to skip down to working with modes just a little bit, because one of the beauties of Surgical Studio, again, is I can add a mode, but once these are saved, I don't have to pick a standard one. I can import them over from the right side from CADLink. So I happen to know I've created this lovely left lower SSEP mode. I click that, click OK, and I have now added that mode. And interestingly, I did not insert a pop fossa, but this system understands that I needed a pop fossa lead, so it added it as amp channel 13. So if I go over here to amp channel 13, you will see that this has been added. These are really neat things that Surgical Studio can do for you. Now I can add my right lower. Now that one does not have a pop fossa in it. So just for editing purposes, I'm going to go back to the left, and I'm going to actually remove this channel by right-clicking and deleting, and I'm going to remove these inputs so they're not part of this. So, but I did want to show you how, if you had inputs that you actually hadn't, or sites you hadn't actually put in yet, when you import a mode, it will actually put those in for you. And these modes are now completed modalities that just import with cursors, all the proper settings for general, all the stems. You do want to confirm this right lower is using high 4, left lower should be high 3, right upper, I actually did not make that change, but high 2, and then I'm going to click save and keep moving along here. So I'm going to add now an EMG, and you've got two here, EMG and TEMG. TEMG is for trigger, EMG is for free run. I do like to rename this free run. bring over the channels I want to do for free runs. So for cervical, I'm going to choose all of these upper channels. Sweep, I generally like 200 per division, which gives me a 2-second sweep as opposed to 100. When a threshold is crossed, thresholds are up here at 25 microvolts. Obviously, you can change those. I want it to store the trials whenever a threshold's broken. Another feature of Surgical Studio is you now do have the ability to save all of the raw data. That was never worked real well on Classic because it would bog the application down with time. That does not occur here. However, do be aware that your file size will increase if you do save it, but just you now have the option of saving all of your free run EMG. Okay, so that's all we need for a free run. I'm going to come over here and add a triggered, but instead of creating it from the beginning, I'm going to, oh, actually I do need to create it from the beginning. I don't have one in my CAD link here. No problem, just takes a couple seconds to do. Add my muscles. Sweep of 5, that sounds good. Auto store behavior. I'm just, again, hover on these and they will tell you what they do. I don't want to go through every detail, but I want to give you the big picture overview of how you can work your way through this quickly. Stimulator, we're going to use the ES sign. I'm going to go back up here and change the rate to something a little faster, like 3 hertz. Output will be high 5. And when we stimulate, we want to start at 5 milliamps, perhaps. You don't have to. You could start at 0 as well. Save that. And I'm going to add another mode. We'll add our MEPs here. So here's a left MEP cervical, just to save you from having to go through all this, but just brought over my muscles, adjusted things here on my general settings, and picked my stimulator. Here we're using the TCS4 stimulator out of output pair number 1. And you do not, and of course, pulse count of 5, ISI of 2, pulse width of 75. You cannot set a initial intensity for MEPs. They will always start at 0 for safety reasons. And we'll bring in the right side over here, and we'll hit save. And finally, we would do a train of 4. And I have a left hand train of 4 already set up, so we'll input that. And we're just using the left hand here. I do think you do want to double check that because the gain does need to be different for a train of 4. So I'm actually going to reuse the outputs for my left hand and put them in the next amplifier. I'm going to add to the label TOF, so I know it's different than the other gain used for the MEPs and free running EMG. And I'm going to adjust the filters a little bit. Go back to modes, select this and pick amp 14, which is now my train of 4. It automatically is going to do a peak and a trough. You may need to look at your midpoint and trough midpoint. And let's double check where our stim is. It's a 2 hertz stim, which is perfect. ES9 out of high 1, which will be my left hand, and we're going to reverse the polarity. And you can start the initial intensity at 30 or whatever you choose. 40.
Hey, Mike.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I got a question from Ernesto Lima, from Dr. Lima, kind of looking back to where the EMG was. If you could explain how to make the tone EMG to make noise when the EMG is activated, when it reaches threshold.
Sure. I will do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Let me go back to that. Let's do it from triggered. Yeah, I wasn't sure if people would be real interested in tones, but there's a couple of options here. If you would like to make this behave like the NIM, hopefully everybody can hear this, but these tones at the bottom, play tone on stim contact. And you can select any tone you'd like, and it will make. I'm not hearing anything there. Not sure if that's going to, let's go back up to the top, see if I can get some sounds out of this here. I'm going to pick a tone for this left deltoid of 500 hertz. Let me just, it may be because this is in, trying to play this over a webinar that it's not going to play properly. But this is how you add tones. A very nice way to do this is enable dynamic channel tones. And if you select that, it just automatically picks tones going from 200, in this case, 200 to 5,000 hertz. And you can actually play them if we had some sound here. And you can change that range to anything you'd like. It just automatically changes those. And my apologies for no sound. I actually checked my sound earlier and it was no problem at all, but it must be because it's playing over a webinar that it's not able to play these tones for us. Does that seem clear, John?
To set up per muscle, yes, and of course down in the general settings down there, correct? Make sure and click the tones below in the TEMG general settings.
Oh yes, yeah. Play tones on threshold detection, and the progressively increased volume is nice. Again, if you hover on it, the volume of each response crossing threshold will be representative of its amplitude. So a response with amplitude 2 times threshold will be 100% of the master volume. So in other words, it will get louder, progressively louder, the higher the amplitude is of the tone that's crossing threshold. So you do need to set up threshold, and that is up here at the top. When you're actually in the modes, you're able to view those and see the floor and the ceiling of each channel and make adjustments on the fly. Okay, so we've made all our modes here. I'm going to come down here to the next setting, mode groups, and I'm going to add a group. And here's where you can add things that you want to control together. So in this case, I want to do all my uppers together, or uppers and lowers together. I could do just uppers, just lowers, but in the sake of time, I'm going to rename this group SSEPs, and I'm just going to interleave all 4 of those. I could add another group. Here's where you could do the uppers, lowers separately, or any other group, all based on the number of modes that you've put in here. So I've got the one group. If I had multiple tests, which in some instances are required, this is where I would create additional tests. Views, definitely something we need to cover, and I'm going to try and do this quickly because I see we're eating up a lot of time here. So first thing I'm going to do, add a window to my view, and in this first view, I want to see my event log, my free run EMG, my upper SSEP, left lower, left upper, my mode controls, my right lower and right upper. And it is going to lay these windows out here. In the background is our mode control window. And now this does take some practice, but I'm now going to drag this window by its title bar, and I'm going to drop it in this tool, and the blue area shows where the space that this window will take up when I drop it there. So automatically resize my mode controls over here and took up that space. Now I'm going to grab my left upper, and I'm going to put that when I'm here, when I'm within this window, this tool that I'm circling right here applies only to the right upper extremity window that I'm in right now. And if I hover here, it will take up that space. Here it would take up the top, the lower right side, or the lower. I'm going to drop it on this left side of this right upper window, and it automatically resizes those. Again, I'm not going to take up too much time here because this is something you'll have to experiment with and work with to get it to work properly for you. And then we'll put free run. I'm actually going to drop that across the bottom here. And then I'm going to take my event log. And for right now, I'm just going to put right here. But I want to take up this whole left side with my mode controls. Put my event log right under that. And resize. All right, have view number one. Use these tools up here to either add windows or add views. I'm going to add another view. The next view we are going to call MEP. And in this view, I'm going to have, again, anything can be in these views, all customizable, but I'm going to have mode controls, right MEP and left MEP. I will dock this one here and dock the right one right next to that. Resize my mode controls, resize my windows. Add another view. This will be 4. I want my mode controls and my left hand TOF. I'll just dock this on the right side of the screen here. Slide that over a bit. And we'll just add one more, and this will just be our waterfalls now. So we no longer have waterfalls and summaries. Waterfalls are in Surgical Studio can either look like waterfalls or summaries, your choice. But you just pick these same windows again. So we want a left lower, a left upper, right lower, right upper, and of course you could have waterfalls for anything. And we'll just dock one of these right in the center. We don't have mode control, so you got to put something in the center. And this is a lower, so we'll put it down there. This is an upper, so that'll go up there. And this is a lower, so that'll go down there. So we've got left upper, left lower on the wrong side, and right lower. Now, these look like average windows. To change them, you go to the gear setting, and then this is like window setup. You can right click and choose window setup. You'll get the same menu. I've just learned to use the gear. So I'm going to pick waterfall, and that will change that window to a waterfall window. And just as an example, I'll right click and choose window setup and change this one to a waterfall. Right click, window setup, waterfall, choose the gear, waterfall. Notice within there is also live, waterfall, cursor table, cursor trend, and noise. Average is going to be the default. Okay, let's save that. Okay, we've done views. Under other, it's where you're going to pick your event list. That's the other thing on our outline here. So you can create all customizable event lists. I'll just pick spine, and let's see what's in spine. If you hit manage, you'll see all the items that appear in spine. course, you can look at all the different event lists right here, but let's just pick spine. And under manage, you could also choose to add or subtract more just by using the tools. So I could type in anything I'd like right here and save that as a new event log. But that's where you need to go to get your event list in there. All right, let's save. So we've gone through and we've created one from the beginning. So I'm now going to save and close that. Next on the list is editing something that previously exists. So I could come here to spine. At the bottom, you choose edit. And let's say in this one, we're working with the editing the spine Cascade Pro 32. We've already got outputs there. Let's just say we wanted to, in this one, get rid of the upper SSEPs. So what I might do is do a save as, give it a new name, and call this a 2-limb. And we won't call it spine. We'll give it a slightly different name. And in this one, I'm going to delete these upper modes. So just an example of how you would, and then choose save and close. And now I have I've now edited that particular procedure, and that is right here. Something that's really important that I do want to get to is how do we get your current procedures from Cascade Classic to Surgical Studio. So that is possible to do. I'm going to minimize Surgical Studio right now and bring up Classic. So if I want to export my Classic procedures and get them into Surgical Studio, it's definitely possible. One important thing that I want to point out is you do want to be on the same release versions of the same two applications that were released at the same time. So if you went to download Cascade Surgical Studio today, I would also recommend that you download, and I'll show you where that is, that you also download from our website. For those of you who weren't with us last week, you go to Cadwell Support. So you can start at cadwell.com, go to Cadwell Support, go to Downloads, IOM Downloads. You do have to log in. If you do not have a Premier account, which I imagine most of you do since you're on our webinar today, upper right is where you download Surgical Studio, discussed last week. What we didn't discuss was the Cascade Classic. So down in the lower left is where you go to download Cascade Classic 3.1 Service Pack 7 installer. I want to point out, please read the Cascade Classic installation instructions. It's very important because Classic does require that you uninstall the previous version before you install the latest version. Not a requirement of Surgical Studio, but definitely a requirement of Classic. Okay, when you launch Classic, this is your first menu. This is the only place that you can get the exporter for Surgical Studio. So from this menu, File, Export Procedure Setup Files for Surgical Studio. Select that. Now, you can have, of course, your list of all of your procedures, but for this example, I'm going to pick this one, SSEP, EMG, MEP, Trainer 4. I'm going to select that and open it. And in the background, it exported it, and it says, finished exporting the procedure setup files to C/Cadwell/Cascade/setup files. So the same place I just browse to, that's where it exported it to. So I click OK. Let's minimize that. Let's go to Surgical Studio. Under Procedure Setup again, at the bottom, you have an option for import. We choose import. If I'm not already there, you would have to browse to where it just told us, which was C, Cadwell, Cascade. I double clicked that, so it took me right to Cascade, and then Setup Files. And now we have this file here called SSEP EMG MEP TOF Classic I-O&M Procedure. So if we choose that, we're not going to import it. And we're getting a message: due to the differences between Cascade Classic and Surgical Studio, please verify the converted procedure template. Okay. So you don't want to do this just before you go into an I-O&M case. It does require you to check it out, and it wouldn't just automatically work just because you exported it. So do this the day before, an hour before, whatever works for you. But now in my list, I have this SSEP EMG MEP TOF file. Choose Edit. And really, there's just a couple of things that you need to check out. Usually, they import really well. So what I find under modes, one of the things you'll want to check is, let's pick our left upper SSEP. Let's be sure the stimulator, this almost always comes over perfect, but it doesn't have an initial intensity because Classic doesn't allow you to do that. So you would want to set all your initial intensities for each of these SSEPs. The other thing, the biggest thing, is likely going to be your view setups. Views do not come over well from Surgical Studio. You'll have them all, or from Classic, pardon me. You'll have them all, but the layouts are going to need to be adjusted. So in this case, I see a left upper, right upper, left lower, right lower event log. So I'm going to start, in this case, I'm going to dock my mode controls on the right. I'm going to put my event log right underneath it. I'm going to resize. I'm going to go to my next view. And this really is the most tedious part when you do export and import setups. And EMG, I like mine at the bottom all the way across, which means I'll just redock my mode controls here. This takes a little practice. Once you get how this docking works, it is really great. So you would need to go through each view. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that, but we'll do one more here. Make sure it and then the final thing that just needs double checking. It may come across okay, but I do find that if you have multiple tests in Classic, it makes some sense to look at the tests here. So in this case, we have two tests, an SSEP, EMG, MEP, and the train of 4 is in a separate test. So that looks good. Let's go back to modes here and look at the train of 4. So it's using the left hand, and let's look at that amp 13 for the left hand here. And that came over just fine. We're using the gain of 5,000. I would just add a TOF to confirm that. And you might need to go through and change the labels. A lot of times with working with Classic, I would actually encourage people to type in left hand, left VM, left TA, and that made for very nice labels. Surgical Studio does not, you do need a different site name for each thing. So you can see it added left and then left dash and left dash dash and left dash dash dash. So you might need to go through and relabel these names so everything looks good. And then you hit save and close. And you have now done the three major things. Window layouts, checked the test setups if you have multiple tests, and set your initial stims. So that is exporting from Classic, importing into Surgical Studio, done from the main menu of Classic, and then from the procedure setup, you import into Surgical Studio and edit them. Okay, final topic for today, creating and editing procedure or report templates. So on the menu here, the reports are next on the list. Just FYI, real quick, modes, back to this again, we'll just focus on surgical Cascade 16 Pro and Elite modes. These are all the different modes that I exported as I was creating and imported when I was creating a new one. So from here, you can import or export these again or delete them if you get too many in here. And that's what this modes tool is for.
Mike?
Reports? Yes, sir.
Got a question from Jamie. Can you import Classic events and modes to Studio?
Not modes. Modes are not separated in Classic. Events would be part of the procedure that you've imported. So not as a standalone entity, it would be part of something that already existed. So if we were to edit this one that we just imported, if I had an event list as part of that, that's a great question. That's a really good question. I should see under here what that event list is. So you are importing them, but they need to be part of a procedure that you're exporting out of Classic. All right, so we'll cancel that. Just wanted to show you where that would be located. Reports. When you first get Surgical Studio, you will have an all waveforms report. It will be the only report you have. A requirement of Surgical Studio is that Microsoft Word is installed on your machine, because that's what is used under the hood of report generation. So if I want to look at this, I select it and I choose edit. And if anybody has done report generation with Classic, this is similar, but it's way easier. We still have the token concept where you're pulling information out of your data that you create. However, at least here we get to see what the actual layout is of tables and forms and that kind of stuff. So what we're looking at here, of course, all this stuff up here is all Windows stuff, but our report would say the patient, and then the stuff that is between the less than and greater than signs and is yellow is a token, and it's going to pull the patient's name out of the patient data record that we created. Birth date, medical record, age, gender, so on and so forth. These are all tokens at the bottom. Now, because it's Word, you can type in anything you want. This is my report. So you could create an entire narrative report here that you could then edit after you created it, because you will have that opportunity before you generate it. So anything you'd like to set up and type in here, you can. Let's see if we can go to I'm going to change it to the print layout so it looks a little bit more like what you're going to end up with rather than the read or the editing layout here. Now, to actually get information out of Surgical Studio, we're going to work with this tool over here on the right. Of course, there's a whole help section here, but we're going to see if we can slide this over a little bit. We're going to add a token. And in this case, we would like to add, again, you'll have to look through this and see if your options are here, but let's say we want to add the events. So here's report user events. You click that, click add, and we've now put in an event log here. And above that, we might want a title. And as you scroll down here, you'll see impedance results, impedance table, recording electrodes. This all waveforms report has a lot of data in it. All of these are tokens where it's pulling data out of all these different possible data out of the record. And at the very last, we'll have our screenshots that we get to select. Now, my recommendation would be to save, rather than mess up your all waveforms report, save it as a new name. If you go to File and Save As, you can then give this report a new name. Okay, to show you how these work then, showed you a little bit of this last week. I'm not going to save that report, but if I call up a patient in review, let's see how we're doing here. Okay, well, John, we've hit the hour mark. I want to give a couple of options for questions. Is there, you want to open that up and see if anybody has a quick question or two?
I've got a few questions here they've asked me in the last moment or two that I can give to you, Mike, if you like.
Yeah, let's discuss them real quick if you'd like. That's fine.
Sure. Let me move up to a couple of them here that were asked. One of them is there a way to bulk import event list and cursor tables?
Okay. Again, not specifically cursor tables or event lists, but one thing I did miss was you can do multiple procedures. You don't have to do your procedure setups one at a time from Classic. You can do those as a bulk import or export and import. So you can pick a whole list of them and then bring them into Surgical Studio. And again, you'd have to work your way through each one of those.
Okay, another one is I've had to change the stimulator settings when transferring a triggered EMG test from Classic to Studio. It transfers as an EMG without stimulator. Is that a common problem?
I would suspect that's a free run. I haven't ran into that as a problem. Have you run into that, John, on the support application support side? I haven't seen
I've not run into it, Mike. I really haven't. It may be a case-specific situation.
I wonder if that's not the case. Yeah, I would suggest on that one that we reach out to us one-on-one and
sure,
solve it.
There's also another one here that if we're going to be open, if they don't have Word, is Office okay to use?
Word would be part of Office, so yeah. I would think.
But now, if I'm not mistaken, we can't use a web-based that. It has to be on local computer. Is that correct?
It's my understanding as well. Yes.
Oh, this is a great question. In Classic, we were able to select different setups and located under folders like spine setup or vascular setup or brain setup, et cetera. Can Studio do something similar?
Repeat that, John.
Okay.
Please.
Basically, what they're saying in Classic, they were able to put different tests in subfolders and name them brain setups or spine setups or vascular setups. Can they do that in Studio?
Oh, not at this time. My recommendation there would be let's put them in as call them all vascular, and then they would be listed as V's, and then spine would be S and that kind of thing. But separate folders, no.
Okay. And one more, if we have time for one more question here. Interested in how to set timers for modalities. For example, want to run upper steps 10 minutes for the report. How do you add to the waveforms?
Two really good questions. Timers are done in under the mode groups area, a little bit different than under Surgical Studio. I'd be happy to, or I'd ask them to either check with applications for more detailed info, or I'm happy to answer any questions like that. Just don't want to, I'd like to show them on the screen rather than try and describe that, but certainly that those can be set up and you are able to add more additional reps to any SSEP you're recording very quickly in Surgical Studio. We have run over. I'm sure people have other really cool things to do today. At least I hope they do. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. It's our pleasure to do this and help you. And hopefully we've generated some good thoughts and questions for you and give you a good basis to work on Cascade Surgical Studio. It's a great application, so please use it. Also, go to our website, go to support. Remember, CADX is free and will be a great tool to help you learn Surgical Studio. So please reach out to us, let us help you, and everybody have a great afternoon. Thank you all for joining us, and try and join us next week, next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Thank you all.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, John. Have a great day, sir.
You as well. Good afternoon, folks.